Good evening, everybody. It's Friday, December 2nd, and there sure is a lot of interesting things going on in the world. I have several things I'm going to discuss tonight, and of course, some of that is going to relate to what is going on in that proxy war over in Eastern Europe. Some of it is going to relate to Pogo, and we all know what that is. And yet, still, some of it is going to relate to a topic I really haven't touched on in all that long. I'm going to briefly discuss the ghost cities. Yeah, those. I'm going to discuss those ever so briefly because those are definitely going to play a role in what is coming post World War III and in the beast system. So I'm also going to discuss China, of course. I have to discuss China because not many other people do, and they are the single biggest threat to the Western world that exists. I mean, in all honesty, they truly are. So, without further ado, I'm going to greet people here. Um, let's see who's in here. Oh, hey there, Snafu. Hey. Oh, yeah, absolutely, Snafu. I was going to touch on some of that, actually, because I was inspired by yourself and also by Vlad to touch on that because it is an important subject. And I think it's a subject that a lot of people seem to forget about because it's true enough that I do cover what these Eastern elites do, these Chai Com and Russian and also Indian, from India and, Pakistani and Iranian and North Korean. I discuss what those elites are doing because that's not touched on enough, I feel, because that's very important because they are a different, entirely separate set of global elites that aren't part of the Western elites. They are their own elites, the Eurasian elites. But I think it's also fair to keep things balanced to discuss some of what these Western elite scumbags are doing with programs such as Pogo, like what they're doing here in this country. I haven't touched on that in a long time. I've spoken on it before, long in the past, when I was still making shorter videos, but I haven't touched on that in so long that I think, I'm going to devote some time to that tonight. So yes, you inspired me to do that, Snafu. So did Vlad, and of course, others. And I always share out your stuff. I rotate it. Also, LCJCs and some of the others that touch on this, I rotate that through the community tab because it is important because it shows people how that program works in living color, in real time. People are getting to see how that's implemented because the things that Goldberg spoke about. Now, if that was even his real name, that most likely was like a pen name or an assumed name to disguise his true identity. To hide from, of course, nefarious people. Of course, we know he was murdered by shadowy people. We can say, of course, that was probably done by agents of some nefarious organization. But he described in great detail how Pogo works, about how gatekeepers and shills are established in order to perpetuate guide people in the direction that they would like them to go with their narratives and with their operations such as data collecting and so on and so forth through the guise of gatekeeper shill-channels and things like it. So yeah, I'm going to touch on that a bit, but also I'm going to discuss what's been developing in the proxy war, and it seems to be drawing to its close. I know I've been discussing it for the past several weeks. Well, the ground is starting to freeze up over there, and looks like a major offensive is in the works. I shared a very, very, very important video out. I wish more people would actually take the time to sit through it and watch the entire thing. Now, that Duran channel is one of the few channels that I take exception to when it comes to larger channels that I give any sort of credit to because, You see, there's very few channels beyond 50,000 subscribers. Generally, my rule of thumb is this. If it is a large channel and it is over 50,000 subscribers, I scrutinize it extremely carefully, and generally, I stay far away from them. Now, I can think of a lot of big channels that come to mind that are definitely Pogo channels, but some of the big channels, to be fair, some of them got large before the censorship and crackdowns really started in earnest, where the algos began to make all the determining decisions as to who would be allowed to grow and who wouldn't. Now, my channel is a very small channel, and it's been a very small channel for a long time because I'm not allowed to grow. And that becomes painfully obvious, especially if you've been with me for a very long time. You've seen my numbers be stagnant virtually within, a plus or minus 50 for the past over a year, I would say. My channel's not been allowed to grow. And I've told people a year ago that I would never, ever be allowed to grow to 3,000 or more subscribers. And lo and behold, here we are over a year later. I'm still hovering at exactly the same numbers that I've been at. So that tells a whole story in and of itself. I'm saying a lot of things that run contrary to towing the line. I'm saying a lot of things that obviously aren't desired, because if they were allowed, then my channel would be allowed to grow, but it hasn't. So I am right over the target. I'm saying things that aren't that aren't desirable at all, that I've been pushed down the way I have been. So, but that's okay though. I'm getting off of the tubes pretty soon. Once I finish my project, I know I keep saying it, but I'm getting ever closer to my goal. I'm almost done with my audiobook, so then I'll be able to retire. By that point, I will have done basically all that I really can do for anybody that, as far as helping others is concerned, that I could do. So, that notwithstanding, I'm going to go ahead and discuss this proxy conflict first. Now, their sources over on that channel, on that video that I shared, their sources are American sources, strangely enough. They have American sources that are telling them that, and one of them is a former Pentagon analyst that worked in the Pentagon, that is saying that the forces that Russia's actually building up are much bigger than, what originally had been discussed and had been disclosed, the 300,000 figure. Now, apparently there's being said that by the Americans, no less, that it's 540,000 instead of just 300,000. But let's just assume that it is 300,000 and not 540,000. That is still a massive invasion force, because that is actually roughly 2 times the size of what we actually invaded Iraq with in the initial invasion of Iraq, when, back in the second time we went in there, part 2, OIF. During OIF, the initial invasion phase, seen us using 160,000 ground forces to go in. I'm not talking about the logistical troops or the Air Force and ground crew and naval personnel that, didn't go in. I'm talking about just the forces that went in across the border into Iraq. It was 160,000 coalition ground troops for the first 3-week invasion phase. Now, Russia is putting together 300,000 that we knew of from before. Now they're saying it's 540,000, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it's going to be the 300,000, because that's what was mobilized, and that's what has been built up in Belgorod and Belarus. Now, the limited incursion forces that are already in the east of the country there, that's not counting them. The 300,000 is what's been built up in Belgorod in Russia, in the Belgorod region, and also in neighboring Belarus, on the southern borders of Belarus with the proxy country. So this massive invasion force to deal the final hammer blow is being assembled, and allegedly now they're saying that 1,500 tanks are going to be part of this strike force, as well as several thousand additional artillery pieces, as if all the artillery they've used wasn't even bad enough. Now they're, assembling all this extra artillery. So this is going to be a hell of a massive hammer blow. And it's also interesting to note that the West is literally like scraping the bottom of the barrel now for weapons to send in, and they're also providing a lot of ground forces that are being dressed in the proxies uniforms so that they can actually like blend in as part of their forces, which will result in some devastating results once the coffins begin to come back to Western nations, predominantly Poland, but also some of the other easternmost NATO allied nations who are contributing to those forces. That is a hell of a video, and I really suggest people watch that. That gives a lot of insights on some of the things that are actually happening right now, like as I'm speaking. So, that's definitely more than enough to deal the final hammer blow. So there's 190,000 or so odd troops left, and that's after all these rounds of mobilizations. That's including all the forces of mercs that the West has sent, and included in that, in the mercs, I'm including the Western military forces that are now donning the colors of that proxy country to go fight in that war. I'm just going to go ahead and include that in the Merc numbers. So 190,000 troops are all that's left. Now they're running out of artillery shells to fight the Russians with. They're running out of basically everything. And the West is now pilfering for weapons in other nations around the world. They're trying to get old Soviet weapons because that way they don't have to, spend excessive amounts of time to train the recruits on them, because that army of that nation is already used to former Soviet weapons, because that's what they started the conflict with before the lion's share of them have gotten destroyed or captured by the Russians. So this is a hell of a thing. This is going to be a hell of a conclusion, because we know already that in the past, couple weeks, they've already been doing massive preliminary strikes, both air and missile strikes on that proxy country. They've been hitting convoys. They've been hitting even more of the supply depots, warehouses, positions, everything. Just like what we did to Iraq before we invaded Iraq. We did a lot of preliminary airstrikes and missile strikes and bombardments before we went in on the ground. And that's exactly what Russia right now is doing to that proxy country. They're doing all their preliminary strikes and bombardments before they themselves go in on the ground from Belarus and also from the Belgorod region of Russia, which is just to the north. It's just north of eastern. I'll just go ahead and say it, Ukraine. I'm tired of my videos getting shit canned, but you know what? I hate having to self-censor. It's bullshit that I even have to self-censor. I'm so sick of that. It's just lunacy, because this is important information and it never makes it to people, because, if you don't self-censor, then your stuff gets basically shit canned. But anyway, this is drawing to a close. And there's also been discussion today about how allegedly, and I say allegedly because we already know that Russia and China have long since been doing a lot of actual military missions and war games together, such as Zapad and all these other war games. But they've also been doing military missions, such as joint naval missions and patrols in the Sea of Japan, and also, in other parts of the Western Pacific. Now, by Western Pacific, that means the Asiatic end of the Pacific, and as well as air patrols, joint air patrols, and also they've been doing lots of different drills, like I just said. So Zapad being one of many. They've done joint naval drills. They've done all kinds of drills together. So them flying fully loaded bombers and landing at each other's air bases, I don't think that's the first time they've ever done that. I just believe that that's the first time that it's ever been publicized. So I'm just going to put it in those terms. I'm pretty sure that they've done many such types of operations in the past. They're doing those things for interoperability, so that way in the future, when they conduct their invasion of the United States and the West, their forces will already have had interoperability training. They'll understand each other's equipment because you got to understand when they've done these training missions like Zapad, the Chinese and Russian soldiers actually train on each other's equipment. In fact, you can find a lot of information about that. In particular, they train on each other's equipment and communication protocols and procedures, and they learn to their chains of command learn to how to interoperate in between each other with such procedures and everything else like that. So they're getting all the vital training between one another's forces that they need in order that when the day comes that they want to conduct a much, much larger invasion or operation with one another, they'll be able to do so with relative ease. Now, again, they've been allies for a very long time. You know, none of this is anything new. Now, the Sino-Soviet split was something that got highly exaggerated on the Western end of things. Now, I think a lot of that was basically an act. And by an act, I mean it was a way for China to be able to get the détente to work out in such a way that once the West and China were open to each other, that China could use that to exploit the West for their maximum gain. Where they would pretend to be accommodating to the West, and from everything from offering cheap labor and all this other stuff to promises that they were willing to globalize and become part of this global economy, and where they could use that to be able to infiltrate and subvert the West, to gain the crown jewels of the West and steal it so that they could use it then to turn right around and build their own indigenous capabilities as a result of such. Now, if China was really truly enemies with Russia, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, because that basically was when it collapsed, it collapsed technically, if you want to get real technical, at the very end of 91, but it was 1992, basically. So when the Soviet Union collapsed in 92, China could have kicked Russia's ass easily and taken back the territory that Russia had basically taken from Manchuria, that was called Greater Manchuria, where Vladivostok and other areas of what's now Russia currently lay within. But China never did that. China didn't kick Russia while they were down. China didn't bother anybody. They were too busy building themselves up to attack their real enemy that they've always perceived as the West. It's one of those keep your friends close but enemies closer. Well, China kept their worst enemy closest in the West by using their détente, their opening with the West, to be able to infiltrate, subvert, and steal from the West greater than any such thing had ever occurred in the history of man before. Because we're talking all levels of espionage: academic, we're talking military, economic, financial. They got the crown jewels. They got everything. They just the academic espionage alone granted them access to so much technology that they used to streamline their manufacturing processes, to become more efficient, to then have leaps and bounds by improving on the technology they stole and then branching out to start creating their own. And that's exactly how they got to be in the position that they're in today. You have to understand. See, most people can't comprehend this, but there are two different elites. People still don't understand this. The Eurasian bloc is its own set of elites. It's like the Colombo mafia family, and the West is like the Genoveses. Let's just put it in simple terms so that people can understand what I'm trying to articulate here. They're like two rival mafia families that will have sit-downs and do business with one another when it suits them, but they'll also go to war with each other when that also proves the most advantageous thing to do for them. Because if they see that, something is in their best interest, they're going to do it, whether that's making deals or whether that's making war, And they're always jockeying and vying and competing for power and control and influence around the world. We're not yet in a one world system because they're not unified. If they were unified, we'd have been in a one world situation a long time ago, but we're not. And there can only be only one winner. And the winner is going to be the East. And the Western mind cannot comprehend that. They simply can't comprehend that. And why is that? Because the West has castrated itself, it's neutered itself, it's cut its own nuts off, like Vlad Grutz said on his video today, and that was a wonderful video. I put it in my Pogo Crimes playlist, along with another one he made, and also with all of Snafu's great videos, his classics, I call them. They're all great. They're all well documented. Same with LCJC. She does a wonderful job in that category as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not ready to talk about the Pogo stuff yet, but I'm about to in a minute. But I need to finish discussing what's really going on here with as it relates to China and Russia. Now, while the West neutered its own capabilities militarily, economically, financially, because it's now a finance-based economy, it's a credit, debt, usury-based economy where we really don't produce like we once did. We really have this ever-shrinking puny industrial sector, and we really lack any sort of heavy industries compared to like what we once had back in the 80s and earlier. The heavy industry has been moving east to Asia, and when we finally get cut off from our enemy China once and for all, they'll have us by the balls, because we'll have no way whatsoever at all to be viable against a nation like that. How can a nation compete against another nation that holds 40% of the whole world's industrial base? How is that even possible? China has 40% of the entire world's industrial base. They produce 38.5 million million tons of aluminum. That's insane for their aviation industry. For their military aviation, aluminum, that plays one of the biggest roles in aircraft production. So how are we going to compete against a country like that? Same with the titanium, 110,000 metric tons, which is just over half of the entire world's titanium production of 210,000 metric tons. Also, 66,000 tons of tungsten production. Tungsten has a wide range of military applications, everything from armor to anti-materiel ammunition, bullets, sabot rounds for tanks. Tungsten is a very, very strong metal when you have a binding agent, such as nickel or others. But tungsten is one of the hardest metals known to man. It's just like gold. Gold is extremely weighty and dense, but pure gold is brittle. It's like the same thing with tungsten. Pure tungsten is brittle, but if you add a binding agent to it, it's basically one of the hardest metals known to man. Tungsten is very powerful. It has a wide range of applications, from vehicle armor, such as tank armor. You only have to have a small percentage of it in the RHA, the rolled homogeneous armor, the steel armor, to make that extremely dense, extremely strong metal. You don't have to completely make a tank out of just, tungsten. You can add a small percentage of it to the steel, to the RHA, to make a tank extremely strong, to be able to withstand all kinds of blows from all kinds of armaments. China produces such a humongous amount of tungsten by a humongous gulf that the next biggest producer, Vietnam, only produces 4,500 metric tons, whereas China produces 66,000. And then you have their steel production, which is ginormous. They produce over 1 billion tons, regular tons, not metric tons, imperial tons. They produce over 1 billion tons of steel annually. That means they produce more steel than the next 20 biggest steel producing nations combined together. That's enormous. All of those have military applications. China also has the biggest chemical industry, and chemicals play a role in munitions manufacturing as well as other things. They have a chemistry is involved in everything. So chemicals are involved in everything from processing of materials to, fertilizers to munitions to whatever. They're in everything. So China's chemical industry is the biggest in the entire world with the biggest output, and it's the biggest in its scope and scale. The size of the industries themselves, the amount of factories and their output. So China is this behemoth. They also have the most armaments production factories in terms of their massive sizes. That just Norinco, one of the subsidiaries of their state arms manufacturing companies, Norinco alone has 300 massive military industrial armaments plants. I mean, that's just Norinco. They have other subsidiaries, like their aviation industry has one. There's China South Industries Group. They have another 200 massive factory complexes. The aviation has dozens. China has 1,200 shipyards, and any or all of them at any moment can be retooled to produce military ships because they're already set up that way as per their civil military fusion policy. And China, already the biggest tank producer in the world, at 750 main battle tanks a year in their massive arms production factories. Also, they're the biggest producer of armor personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles because they can produce 3 times as many of those per tank that they produce annually. So they obviously would be able to produce the most artillery and air defense systems. They already have the biggest amount of air defense systems, and they're tied with Russia in terms of artillery. And you take storage numbers and active numbers into account of everything they have. The China is just massive. They're enormous. They have the biggest combat air fleet on Earth. They outnumber us by 1,050 combat planes. I mean, fighters, ground attack aircraft, and strategic bombers combined. In terms of when I say combat aircraft, that's all 3 of those categories combined. China's massive. They can produce 400 fighters or ground attack aircraft annually. And I don't know about how many strategic bombers they can produce, but they already have a humongous amount of those. They have the second biggest overall strategic bomber fleet on Earth after Russia, because Russia has a lot of their strategic bombers they produced during the Cold War in storage where they're well maintained. But China just has the most fighter and ground attack aircraft of any nation, which is why they have the biggest combat air fleet, because they just have a freakish amount of fighter aircraft and tactical ground attack aircraft. And all of them are 4.5, and 5th generation aircraft. They're all exceedingly modern, exceedingly advanced, new. So they also have the biggest, most technologically advanced Navy, undisputed. They might not have the same amount of aircraft carriers as us. They're getting up to about having half as many as we do, but they have the biggest sub fleet, and we already know what's a single sub, the French sub Saphir, an old sub, by the way, did to an entire American carrier group in NATO exercises back in 2015. They sunk a whole carrier group single-handedly, and that was an old sub. China has newer subs than that, and they have the biggest submarine fleet in the face of the earth. They're a massive threat that people underestimate, and it's really foolish because they're the world hegemon in real numbers, real terms, real capabilities, real numbers and statistics. They're the biggest threat that the West faces by far. Nobody can compete with China. At this point, it's too late in the game. 5 years ago, the torch was passed from us to China because China, at that time, all their massive arms producing plants started coming online about 5 years ago. So they acquired this massive manufacturing capability 5 years ago, and we also started to see that the Pentagon's own supercomputers had us losing every single solitary war simulation to them back then as well. So they're this ginormous threat, and most people don't even understand or realize that, but they're one of the 10 kings of Revelation for sure, no doubt about it. Same with Russia, and the other 8 of the other biggest allies that they have. They're smaller allies than China, obviously, but I'm saying the next 8 biggest. Those are going to be the 10 Eurasian kings who give their power to the beast. Like it talks about in Revelation, the ten kings who give their power to the beast and reign with him for 1 hour in biblical time. Those are going to be the 10 Eurasian kings who are victorious in World War III, who destroy Mystery Babylon, USA, and their allies, of course. That's without question. So the West is going to be defeated and occupied and colonized. But after that, what will happen to the survivors? Well, the survivors of Western nations that are captured and aren't killed are going to be filtered through concentration camps. And they're going to be the ones that'll take the beast marks. They're going to go to the ghost cities that are throughout Central Asia, that are in China, that China's built in Angola. There's even some in the Middle East. There's some in Turkey. There's some in there's the one in Saudi Arabia called Nome. It's this high-tech, futuristic ghost city. There's ghost cities all over the world, and they're predominantly built by China or other Eastern nations. Those are going to be for the Western survivors of World War III who will take their beast marks and that'll be filtered through camps, get their marks, and they'll go to these places. That's what's going to happen. There won't be any West. It'll be colonized by the likes of China, Russia, and their allies after World War III. It'll be an Eastern-dominated New World Order. A lot of people in the West can't understand that. They think these Western sniveling elites, these punks, they've never done anything a day in their lives, they think they're going to win out. But the devil doesn't want weaklings like that co-ruling with his son. He wants warlords. So he's going to use them until their purpose has been used up, and then they're going to get kicked to the curb. So that's what always happens. Evil always destroys other evil. It's always been that way, and it's always going to be that way. And even the 10 kings don't even reign together with the beast for that long before things fall apart again. Because greed, envy, lust for power and control, that's always what happens when you have evil trying to come together. Somebody always gets greedy. Somebody always wants more. And somebody always wants to, be more powerful. So that always causes infighting, because notice in Revelation, it says that they reign together with the beast for 1 hour. Well, 1 hour in biblical timing is not very long, if people haven't noticed that. That's not very long in biblical timing. We're talking months before things fall apart again and the infighting begins and the wrath of God comes down onto the earth. So, I see things very clearly from that standpoint because it all makes sense. It all makes perfect sense. And the way the world's going, it makes all the more sense. The West is waning and it's being defeated in this proxy conflict. Its capabilities are being bled dry because all these weapons and munitions that are being given away, not just there, but that we've lost and expended in Afghan and Iraq and in the Syrian civil conflict, which I read a lot on last night. I read more about the foreign involvement in that conflict, not so much the foreign involvement of Russia, Iran, the proxies, and China, but I'm talking about from the West. And the West expended a lot of munitions, not just to arm the different factions that we supported in that conflict, but also to support them from the air as well. We wasted a lot of stuff in that conflict, and that was a 10-year running conflict that ran for 10 long years. So, and guess what? Assad won that conflict. So, yes, it was true that he almost got ousted. He almost got overthrown by the factions. But when the foreign help came in, he managed to cling on, and then he even rolled things back. So all of that, all those resources, that money, the equipment, everything wasted. Everything wasted. I mean, we cannot easily replace these things because it goes back, once again, to where I started speaking on these things when it comes to the small level of remaining heavy industries that we still possess. Our military industrial complex has shrunk immensely after the Cold War ended because they didn't see a need to keep one. They didn't see a need to keep one after that. It just shrunk immensely. All these factories, they got shuttered. All the equipment stripped out of them. They were even going to shut down the one tank factory we have left in Lima, Ohio. Yes, they were. They were about to shut down our last remaining tank plant. What a disgrace. That is such a stab in the back. That is such a betrayal of this country. How could they do that? You know, it's disgusting. It's totally disgusting what they've done to this country and what they did to an organization I used to be happy to be a part of. You know, what they've done to our armed forces is a disgrace. You know, when I was in the Army, I couldn't even imagine how it is now back then. Even just 10 years ago as I was getting out, it was nothing then like it is now. Now it's a bunch of wokesters and weaklings and hippies, and you know, all this green stuff has gotten into it and permeated throughout the ranks. It's a whole nother generation. It's a new generation, and they don't even have enough ammo to train with now. I mean, come on. I mean, you got the West going and trying to pilfer ammo from countries in other parts of the world to try to equip a proxy country, that a conflict we're losing. You know, I mean, we have broken our own backs on a proxy conflict because we don't have the industries necessary to replace all the losses. We're shelling out money we can scarcely afford to just be giving away willy-nilly to another country. That's such a betrayal of this country. What about Jackson, Mississippi? What about Florida? What about all these places that had disasters? And we're not spending money there. Our economy's gone to absolute total shit. You know, I mean, we're giving away money to foreign countries. What a damn disgrace. It's disgraceful. This country's been betrayed 7 ways to Sunday. You know, I mean, as the saying goes, you know, but enough of that. I'm going to basically switch gears here, and I'm going to discuss the whole Pogo thing. Now, if you really want to understand that in living color, another saying, in real life as it's unfolding, you needn't look any further than the playlist I have called Pogo Crimes. There's people that do outstanding documentation of that. Because that is an integral program of the Western elites, you know, putting aside the Eastern elites momentarily because not enough people talk about them, so I talk about them. We'll talk about the Western elites. Now, the Pogo program, it's part of the media narratives and tracking and tracing programming. And the whole purpose of it is to basically not only socially engineer people, but it's also there to basically track and trace people because that's how they get their insidious programs to basically get onto people's electronics and basically track and trace them. And you know, these things are well documented as they happen in real time. You know, I'm going to support my friend Snafu Snaps as he goes about this, and you know he's doing an outstanding job. You know, yeah, I mean some people might think his method's a little crude, but you know what? I support him 100%. I don't see anything wrong with it because he's documenting things and he's using receipts. He has the receipts. He's using evidence to back up his assertions. So he isn't lying. The only people lying are the people that are trying to, you know, avoid being discovered, you know, because there's a lot of shady, shisty shit going on. And, you know, it's definitely not for the benefit of the people. And those who try to basically unearth the truth, they're the ones being shadow banned. You know, I mean, it's not just me. I mean, I'm being shadow banned for a whole different set of reasons. But, you know, the whole Pogo scheme, as discussed by David Goldberg, like I said, whether that was his true name or not, you know, I mean, it's all very true. You know, they do have shills and gatekeepers and such that basically their entire aim is not only socially engineering people, but it's also as an insidious means to basically infiltrate the masses, subvert them, infiltrate them, subverting through the social engineering aspect, but also infiltrating them through programming and other such means to be able to track and trace them. Because it's not just the Eastern elites who have their own version of the beast system, which will be the one that ends up prevailing, but it's also the Western elites who are trying to build their own version of the beast system. So when you see people who document these things saying that certain people are helping to build the beast, they're not lying about that. They're not lying at all. And people who are really short-sighted and blind, they just write off what people are basically showing them evidence of. People just write it off. They think it's, drama or pettiness. Well, no, it's not. They're actually showing how these things work in real time for people who have the eyes to see it, the ears to hear it, who aren't deaf, dumb, and blind. I hate to, say it like that, but a lot of people are deaf, dumb, and blind, and they don't want to acknowledge reality. And, I don't know what to do for those people, but, I've done about everything I could for people, but, I get shadow banned, like I said, for my own set of circumstances, for my own reasons, because I'm speaking out against the CCP and the Eastern elites who, by the way, have basically infiltrated every single solitary corporate board of every American multinational there is. So they get to create pro-CCP policies that benefit them and basically harm us. So every time I speak out against the Red Chinese, the commies, the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, of course I get shadow banned for it because they hate me. Like I said, when they invade me, or when they invade America, they're going to basically put me on a deck of cards, like probably for the Texas region, like what we did to Saddam Hussein's regime cronies, when we, labeled them as HVTs, high value targets to go after. Because I've spoken against the CCP, they're probably going to come after me. So, I totally anticipate that one day. But back to the whole Pogo thing, they're doing the Pogo program for very similar reasons as the Chi-Coms have programs like TikTok. It's like part of their own Pogo program. They're both sets of elites have their own programs like this, and Pogo is really no different than the types of things the CCP does. It's really not. It's just done by a different set of elites. The world is an evil, evil place. It is an evil, wicked, diabolical place. Anything, that's why the Bible warns us about the world. The world. The world is evil. It doesn't matter what side it is. Anything that is of this world, doesn't matter what part of the world, is evil. There are no good guys or bad guys in this world. There's just the world. And then there's the righteous or the good people, the people that want to be good at least, because not one man is really good, as the word explains diligently. But, what I'm saying is there's the people that want to seek a personal relationship with Yeshua Messiah, with the Father, Yah, Hashem, and with the Holy Spirit. There's people that want a relationship with the Most High God, and then there's the people who don't. There's the people that are trapped in the world and worldly mentalities, It just doesn't matter what part of the world. It's all evil, Eastern, Western, whatever. But, the evildoers have their own programs. They have their own programs. And they seek to devour people. They're trying to devour and destroy people. So, I want to welcome everybody again. And I want to welcome my foreign audience. I know I don't speak to people in other countries often who come to my channel, and I'm sorry about that, but to my viewers in French-speaking countries, bienvenue à l'affiche. Welcome to the show. To my German subscribers, zu meine Zuhörer auf Deutschland und der Schweiz und auch Österreich, willkommen. Und auch guten Abend heute. So, welcome to my listeners from Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. Welcome, and good evening today. So, and also I noticed I had somebody from Nepal in here. Welcome. and everyone from every part of the world who listens. I know I don't have a very big audience, but for those from other countries, I welcome you and thank you all for coming. Um, you know, things are about to take a dramatic turn in the world. So people are going to witness a lot of changes coming very, very soon. 2023 is going to be a very, very interesting year for sure. A very interesting year. I see things becoming a lot more tumultuous as time passes, as it continues to move forward. Now, again, about the ghost cities, that's going to be more of like the aftermath, the after effects of the Third World War. Because remember, Mystery Babylon, USA, gets destroyed in World War III. And we really don't hear anything else of the West after that. It's no longer mentioned in the end times. The West is gone. It's over. There is no more West. And these Western elites are going to go with it because they'll have no more chips on the table. They won't even matter. It's not like they can bribe their way out of trouble. I mean, when the elites of the East can just take their money and make them slaves, humiliate them. And that's what's happened to rulers throughout history who lose conflicts. Take Emperor Valerian from the Roman Empire, for instance. Now, Rome was a major power for its day. There was the Chinese Empire and then the Roman Empire, which were two basically superpowers of the ancient world at the same time. They both existed around pretty much the same time frames. Now, the Persian Empire was the one who defeated the Romans, who captured Valerian. Now, Valerian, captured by the Persians, was humiliated extensively. He was used as a footstool for the Persian emperor. Now, take that concept and you can basically multiply that many times fold, because remember, we're going into a time that is going to be more brutal and savage than ancient times, than antiquity, than also the medieval times even ever were. We're going to see a time that is drastically more brutal than those times ever were. The Bible even says, there was never a time like it, nor will there ever be again. So we're heading into some very uncivilized, very brutal times. People are going to see all kinds of things that they never imagined that could ever exist or occur. Now, I mean, you can take that in the sense of, sci-fi related types of issues, or you can take it in the sense of, just the types of directions that human beings will basically, follow into, I mean, as far as like their innermost, bestial levels of behavior are concerned and other such things. Things are going to change drastically. And this civilized world, this civilized society that people think they live in will go by the wayside. And I think a lot of people are too distracted by a lot of petty BS going on to even realize what's actually occurring in real time. You have all these petty distractions come up, like all these little cults of personality. Like you see people are into, these rich people that really don't have their best interests in minds at all. Like Musk, or like these rappers or whoever else. They're all there as a distraction. They're all there as they're all working for these Western elites, and I'm talking about these entertainers, these billionaires, these puppet politicians, but more and more, they're being co-opted to work for the Eastern elites as well, because, like I mentioned before, the elites of the CCP, and remember, China does have their own elite classes, especially the higher-ranking CCP Politburo members that are purportedly trillionaires. I mean, they have extensive wealth. Putin is even rumored to be the richest man in the world in terms of all his hard assets, and his liquid assets. That's, like I said, I can't confirm that, but I've heard that, on many occasions. Now the CCP, it's the same case, you know. And China also has the most billionaires of any nation on earth. I mean, they have an immense amount of billionaires. They have more billionaires than we do. We have 700 and what is it? 725, and they have 769, I believe. I've explained it all in the past. I have past videos that I go over those numbers. I have it all wrote down somewhere, but I have to go dig all that out. But China also has the biggest middle class in the world too. So China's wealth has grown substantially. China does have the world's biggest middle class, and they have the most billionaires. They even have trillionaires. So they have their own set of elites. They have 40% of the world's industry. They have the biggest conventional armed forces and paramilitary on the face of the earth. They're now a leader in many key technologies, key areas of technologies. I mean, we're talking about a country that leads the world now in AI, robotics, fractional orbital bombardment systems for their nuclear weapons, their hypersonic program, their electronic warfare capabilities, their cyber warfare capabilities. They've got particle colliders. They can make artificial miniature stars. I mean, this country has come a long way since the 1990s. I mean, they have. This country is definitely the dragon in the physical layer of the layered prophecy, and the dragon gave his power unto the beast, who is like the beast and who can make war with the beast. Well, you know, in the spiritual layer, the dragon is Satan, but in the physical layer, we're talking about a country, the dragon nation, China. You know, I mean, they're the world hegemon in real terms, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. While we're living off our past reputation, That's all there is to it. You know, we have the credit card, but we don't have shit on it, as the saying goes. So that's where we are. And we're heading into a tumultuous time because we're heading into a time frame where conflict is going to be created as a result of these great power competitions. And when I say great power competitions, I'm not just talking about nations. I'm talking about the elites that run them, you know, the East and the West. That is a real paradigm. You know, I used to, like I've said before in some of my past lives, I used to laugh at the concept of the Cold War. But then when I realized, you know, this is real, it really is real. The whole East-West thing is a very real paradigm. And like I said, I used to laugh about it, but now I see how real it is. When you really do deep digging into these topics, into these different elites and what they're after and what their goals are, what they stand for, there is some very striking differences, and they're undeniable. So, I've been going almost an hour now. I'm going to say hello one final time here before I get going. Shit, that's funny, Shadow Mask. Let's see. Yeah, they're just entertainers, Shadow Mask. They're just a bunch of goofballs. They're there to distract people from real issues. They're really just a bunch of nonsense. Hey, what's up, Nomix? And Paula, and Sunsetter, and Gorilla Max. Get out of here, punk. Gorilla Max. Douchebag. Oh, what's up, Tommy? B-Ran. Snaps. Wild Animus. Brogan and Juan. Well, welcome, everybody. Y'all be blessed. Yeah, I guess Gorilla Max didn't like what I had to say earlier. Well, he can go get bent. I'm going to get going, y'all. Thank you all for coming.